Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Discourse. This is our weekly news show here at NYU Game Center, which is the game design department here at New York University. And on the Discourse here, we talk about game industry news and hot takes, hosted by our full-time faculty, Frank Lance and Naomi Clark. Oh, I need to fix the captions. Okay, but before I do that, take it away, Frank and Naomi.
Thanks, Robert. Hi, Naomi.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Hi, Mirabai. How are you?
Hopefully Mirabai's good
Hi,
too.
Hi, chat. Stop chat.
Hello, chat.
What's going on?
Oh, man.
How you guys feeling today?
I can't believe Danny is already calling you a blowhard, Frank. What's is this a new era? What happened to civility?
Look, it's not. I know it looks like cyberbullying, but it's not. We have this fun relationship where I'm really nice to him, and he's really cruel to me, and constantly calling me names, and just real vicious stuff. You know, I mean, that's how he expresses affection. It's fine, I guess. Is that fine? Is that it?
It sounds somehow traditional and it's sort of like, you know, mentor teacher relationship. Like if you guys were practicing an old fashioned martial art of some sort, like maybe he'd be the type of student who would be like trying to ambush you to see if he could defeat you.
It's funny you mention that because he keeps saying he's going to. He's going to open up a can of whoop ass on me, beat me with a stick. I just assumed it was his way of joking, but you know, now that I think about it, maybe it's not appropriate. I don't know.
Well, speaking of which, let's look at our first news item. Speaking of like students trying to keep their faculty and administration honest. This was something that just happened like an hour ago, and then it vanished from the internet. We don't know why yet, but we were going to talk about it, so we decided to just keep it on the docket. Apparently, just maybe an hour ago, the Washington Square News, which is the long-running student newspaper of NYU, been around since 1973. The entire staff resigned, and they put up this letter, which you can still get on the internet if you're a clever person like Robert Yang, who uses sites like Archive. We don't know why it was taken down. Maybe they're retracting. Maybe their two advisors, two professors from the journalism department, have intervened and been like, whoa, hold up, guys, don't all resign at once. We'll deal with this problem. That would be like the best case scenario, because it looks like they resigned because of problems with a faculty, or not a faculty advisor, a staff advisor who was basically appointed to help run the newspaper. It sounds like there were some pretty bad problems there.
Yeah, it seems like, it's a little hard to figure out. You have to kind of piece it together. But if you do, it kind of paints a little bit of a kind of an Aaron Sorkin picture. You can imagine this, they hired, or they brought in this advisor, this senior person who, I don't know who they are, but presumably some kind of grizzled journalist vet who came in and decided, I'm going to tighten things up around here, and we're going to get things ship shape, and started yelling at people and bossing them around, fired the editor-in-chief and said, hey, we're going to sweep, clean house. And then they all just quit. The entire staff of the newspaper just okay, we're out. That's BS. So so solidarity to our fellow news heads.
Yeah, and we've been interviewed by these folks before, right? Is this the same paper that sort of comes by to make inquiries about various departments? Oh wait, you know what? I can see it again. I can see it again at the original website. I just had to go through an extensive CAPTCHA process in order to actually get to it. But it is here. And I don't know what's going on with their site, but there's definite shenanigans occurring. And I was confused by this because I don't know, have you ever worked on a student paper, Frank, when you were in college or high school? Yeah, so I used to be big into journalism. I was an intern at the Seattle Times for a while as well, and did a lot of design and layout. That's sort of before I became a game designer. I thought, I want to be a journalist. This is a bad idea, as many of our game design students who are former game journalists can tell you. But an advisor for a student paper is really generally supposed to be kind of hands off, right? They're there to facilitate. They're there to make sure that, I don't know, that the students have a sounding board in case there's some sort of thorny legal issues coming up. They're there to help kind of interface with other institutions, right? But not to be I'm in charge. I'm going to have any kind of editorial oversight of this. And it sounds like this is a very weird, disturbing situation. Yeah.
Naomi, let me ask you a question. Mm-hmm. Do you think this could happen to us?
Oh, I think it. Well. So who are we? Who are we in this situation? I think. Yeah. So.
I think we're the editorial.
We're the editorial board, because there is an editorial board for the paper. It's two journalism professors, just two, and then the editor-in-chief who was fired a couple weeks ago.
Who would come in to boss us around? What Twitch streamer would they bring? NYU would be to say, look, Naomi, you're fine. Frank, you've got to go.
Right,
let's put someone younger in there.
Or no. This would
both quit, right?
So it'd be we're the editorial board, and we've talked about this before, right? We were well, what if some of our students really want to stream? People out there are what if we had we opened up this channel, twitch.tv/NYU Game Center, to a whole bunch of students that wanted to stream. Now, actually, it's kind of complicated because there are a bunch of broadcasting regulations that affect schools and stuff. I think the last time we looked into this, but
Alexander King is also saying that it wasn't just this person firing the editor-in-chief and being really hard-nosed and difficult to work with, but also maybe some problematic edits to some Black Lives Matter stories and things like that.
Well, they were accused of, I think the staff accused them of racism. And then this advisor was just like, you guys are just too easily offended, right? It sounded like it was a serious, definite okay boomer kind of situation to the extreme max or something.
That phrase. Presumably it's a hate crime. So maybe tap the brakes.
Right, okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. That's a slur.
No problem. Look, this is all I know. That there's two sources of up to the minute news that you associate with NYU: the Washington Square News and the Game Center Live. So now one of them's down. So I guess we are currently the place to turn. So
that's right. This is where you get all the news. So we're giving a shout out to the Washington Square News. Hang in there, be strong. As a pool of labor. Like obviously nothing could be done without these guys. I don't know what part of management hired a sort of conservative journalist out of 1985 to try and oversee students at NYU, but that's like what a stupid idea.
Yeah, thumbs down on that one.
All right, let's go. Let's keep on going to the next link, whatever's in there.
I think we're talking about Amazon Luna. So long-term fans of the show will know that Naomi and I are fascinated with Stadia, Google's streaming game console, and now there's a new competitor in town. Also wanting to get in on this streaming stuff, cloud gaming, right? Which is the Amazon Luna. You have to end whatever your game cloud streaming service is. It has to end in an A. So yeah, that's what we know. What's the
where did this name come from,
Naomi? It's cheaper. That's the base. Like Stadia is like $10 a month for whatever it is you get from Stadia, which no one knows because literally no one has ever used it. So this Amazon one is cheaper. So presumably something similar, but
no, this one's going to work differently. The model that they're using is like premium cable. You have to pay per channel you want to subscribe to. So you want HBO, that's $10 a month. You want HBO and Showtime, it's $20 a month, right? And so on and so forth. So so right now there's a channel called Luna, which costs $6 a month. It's not clear what's going to be on that channel. It's like they have Resident Evil 7, Control, Panzer Dragoon, just like an assortment of stuff.
When I'm not playing Control, I switch over.
I like to play Panzer Dragoon. Yeah,
I mean, and look, I love Panzer Dragoon. By the way, that's like the best game mentioned in this entire article.
Yeah, and then their other channel is the Ubisoft channel, which that's what's sort of interesting about this, right? It's like, wait, there's a channel and it's just associated with a publisher. So like in theory, Ubisoft would be like releasing games that might just go to their Amazon Ubisoft channel, or that would be a place where you could get it for free.
Tom Clancy mobile game.
Can you get that? Well, you might be able to. I mean, if these like, franchise channels are any indication, like, HBO Max or Disney Plus, then yes, like all Ubisoft games going back to however far back they can make them work over the cloud will go on that channel. But
does this stuff work now? Is it now just working well enough that they think they could just roll this out and there's no lag? It's just I'm running around in Assassin's Creed and I'm pressing buttons and things are happening and the entire thing is that all the processing is happening in the cloud. Because if so, and it's just working, then let's bring on these new weird game designs that are made possible by that, right? Where you have
why not?
$1 billion processor, right? That is running like big iron, like, huge game engine with gorgeous, interesting, weird, cool processing happening. And then I'm just, I just have the dumb terminal in my home.
Right. Well, yeah, I am sure there are probably R&D projects like that have been in development at Microsoft and at Amazon Lumberyard or whatever it's called now, to try and see, like, is there a cool game idea that can come out of this? So far, we haven't seen any results of that, right? Like, nobody's rolled out a cloud-only game to be like, here's our new flagship cloud-only game. Just like you get a new WarioWare whenever Nintendo has new hardware that they want to demo, right? So that sort of suggests like maybe nobody's hit on the killer app for a giant cloud server yet. But then, yeah, I don't know. Does this work well enough? Well, I think the consensus seems to be it's not great for games that really rely on low latency. Like it's not going to be great for a multiplayer action game. But you could probably play Assassin's Creed Valhalla over a connection like this, and it'll be a little choppy occasionally, but you'll put up with it because you don't want to install it on your Chromebook. Yeah.
It's interesting. You know who was ahead of the curve on this? There was the New York company that I think is no longer even around. They were one of our sponsors for a while. They're named after the villain corporation in Final Fantasy.
Shinra, yeah.
Yeah, Shinra, right? Shinra, a few years ago, right? Shinra
Yeah, not that long ago.
It was a New York-based company that was doing this. Maybe they were just slightly ahead of the curve. Or maybe they're still around in some different form. But
yeah, and this has been tried over and over again, as people are talking about in chat, right? Like, on Live, that game streaming service from the 2000s that Bevier is mentioning, and Alexander King has mentioned, a bunch of the older examples too from Sega and so forth. And it's just like VR. The question is, has the time actually arrived when this will be popular? And it seems like the majors, Microsoft and Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, right? And Microsoft has said, we're really concerned about competing with Amazon and Google. We're not at all worried about anymore about Sony and Nintendo, right? They don't see themselves as being in competition with Sony and Nintendo anymore. They're like focusing on this new arena to fight with some of the other FANGs, or they want to be one of the FANGs.
Right. And it seems like maybe the dynamics here is for these big companies is that the risk of being left out when we do cross that threshold and all of a sudden it turns out that it's really important to have this service is so much greater than the cost of launching something early and having it not work. Right. So you dump some money into something, you're almost like reserving your place at the table, or when in a year from now it is important to have cloud streaming.
Right, so it's a loss leader of sorts, I guess, and they'll get the Ubisoft to put some stuff on the Ubisoft channel. I don't know. It sort of feels like maybe this. Well, it could flop over and fall over, but I would probably, if I was going to try and think about what the smart bet would be, it's that at some point this is going to work okay enough for it to be a segment of. Of people paying money. And I don't know exactly who the people paying for these subscriptions are going to be, right? Is it people who are thinking, I don't want to try and keep up with buying a $60 or $80 game every month to keep up with whatever's latest. I would rather just pay $7 a month, and then I'll just turn on the Luna channel and see what they got on, what's new, right? So you just sort of surf like you would a TV and be like, I'll see what's up. I kind of have that relationship to Apple Arcade already, right? I'm still subscribed to Apple Arcade. I don't know why. Maybe out of some.
You forgot to turn it off.
No, I think about it. I think about it every month because I'm like, what's on Apple Arcade? I'll go check it out. And there's usually some kind of interesting game, and I play. Yeah, there's something, right? There's enough games still coming out on there that I'm like, okay, I could see what's interesting there. Alexander King's like, to play Dear Reader. No, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Alexander, not to play Dear Reader.
Dear Reader, that's the best. You got Dear Reader. You
got Where Cards Fall.
You've got
you got that one about the
Overland is the hot. I'd say that's the hot.
that's really actually mean. Yeah. Oh, and Tangle Tower. That's on Apple Arcade. I didn't even know that. I have that on Steam by mistake. Sorry.
Card of Darkness. There you go. Card of Darkness. Yeah.
So there are a bunch of things coming out. Like you can
play those. It's not like I don't know. For me, like I have a Fire Stick, and when it's time, when that time of day rolls around, when it's time to go off of the bad screen and go onto the good screen, I turn on my Fire Stick, and if that had a game service in it, I would maybe play video games. But it's not like I'm not going to turn off YouTube to turn on my Switch. That's too much effort. It's like behind the couch, I would have to get up and move and turn it on. I just think for me, it would be the convenience factor that might get me.
Sure, and I think that's it's still the dream of convergence, right? That you just sit there and you're like, what if I want to play a game instead of watching Netflix? Let's see what's on, and you just change the channel. So I'm usually the downer. I'm usually the downer about this stuff, and I want to just I'm going to attempt to like project some optimism into a future where this could be good, right? So imagine that this becomes enough of a model a decade from now, say, where there are a whole bunch of channels that, and maybe it's not like you pay an extra $5 or $10. Like the whole proliferation of subscription streaming services is a little bit out of control right now, right? But eventually there are packages that people can buy, and maybe you can customize the package, you can get a fair deal on it. And so there's a channel that's, like you can decide to have in your bundle of game packages, you can have the glitch channel and the retro remake channel and the channel that's curated by some terrible YouTube streamer. But then there's another channel that's curated by a better YouTube streamer. And you can watch people play these games, and then you can just shift seamlessly into playing them because you're a subscriber. But they're actually sort of maybe more organized around aesthetic interests somehow. Like, is that possible?
Yeah, it could be a good thing. It's new things are interesting, so it could be good in that sense. I think it's a really there's an interesting relationship between video games and computing, right? Like the early history of video games, a lot of it is just a demonstration of what computers are and what they're capable of, right? So if you think about, space war and stuff, it's like people figuring out what can we do with these computers? Here's a demonstration of what they're capable of. So they've always had this relationship. And then the question becomes, what is computation a thing that we run in our houses, or is it a thing that we tap into like electricity? So is computation more like an appliance that everyone has, that you have your CPU to run your, or is it like a commodity that you plug into and it flows through the network? And I think that we're kind of maybe entering a new phase. I've been playing around a lot with GPT-3, as you know, the new AI language model from OpenAI. And there's a feeling there that it's a return to mainframe computing, right? You get access to this big device. Everyone is waiting in line to use it. You use it, you submit your computation, and then you get the output back. And maybe this is another example of that, and maybe that's the direction we're going, and maybe that's what the web has always been. And now that a lot of what we do, in computers is through a kind of a dumb terminal, accessing compute on the other end. I don't know.
Right, and I think we just have not figured out yet what are the things that having access to like a lot of processing power in the cloud, like what is it good for, right? So there's certainly a lot of interesting AI applications. That could be an area. I mean, right now, most of what people are talking about is lots of intensive graphics applications, which always feels to me like that's the first place that the game industry tries to go, right? It's the sort of the default first expansion, but then thinking about how it might actually change the experience or gameplay or the way people interact with each other is the other part of it.
If grumpy old man Chris Crawford were asked about this, he would say it's an opportunity to make games with more process intensity.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
About this stuff,
and we haven't gotten good. I feel like we as an industry, like most of us are not that great at thinking about how to exploit process intensity, right? Because it's mostly been on a GPU. And sometimes the AI programmers back in the day, 5 or 10 years ago would be like, we need more cycles on the CPU where this GPU focus is killing us. But recently I haven't is that as much a problem anymore? I don't know, it's going to drive a little bit of an arms race to come up with something to use all these cycles for. And I don't know, is that the right way to think of it? You gotta come up with some way to use all this land. That's how we got enormous ranches, right? And gigantic, carving up the the middle of this continent into parcels for railroads and giant ranches, right? It was like, well, there's all this land. We got to come up with something. We got to do something with all this land.
You hate horses and trains all of a sudden? Come on. This would be, if I were an ambitious young game designer, maybe a recent graduate of the NYU Game Center, I would at least be thinking about, I should pick up the phone and call Amazon and say, hey, I've got some ideas for how to do stuff for Luna that is unlike any game that anyone's ever done before. We could take advantage of the inherent structure to make a brand new kind of game experience that could only be on Luna. And then on the phone call, I would think of what that was and pitch it.
Absolutely. And I think it's hopefully a good time to be a curator too. Like if you can figure out how to get into that sweet spot of not just being like a zero paid free labor Steam curator, but you can actually say, look, I put together a selection of games. I know who my audience is, and they're an audience of this size, and I can sort of provide you with a new game every week to like dive into with me. Like I feel like that's going to be hopefully be more of a role that will be opened up by these things. Like that's my optimistic scenario. And those could be tiny games. A lot of them could be very small games. In fact, it's useful to have games of different sizes, just like it's useful for a television channel to have content of different lengths and different kinds of serialization.
GJs.
Oh, GJs like Brian and GJs of the world? No.
Yeah, like a game DJ.
A game J. I thought you were talking about GJ Lee. Like I'm like, oh yeah, GJ is really good at doing this for sheep's men. Yeah. There you go. But shout out to Salty Humors is asking, are there Netflix curators? And I think there aren't, because
Netflix no longer has a bunch of content.
Well, yeah, for one thing, Netflix doesn't have oceans of content, but also the channel surfing is a lot easier than game surfing. That is my guess, right? Yeah. Or at least it's different in some kind of way, where there's a reason why so many games are experienced through Let's Plays, through streams, right? And Netflix shows are not experienced through someone streaming the show and then you watching them experience it. So there's something in there. Yeah. Like is going to affect the business dynamics of this stuff and who's in the middle.
Two thumbs cautiously up for Luna. And
maybe.
Let's see where it goes.
At least it's a huge influx of Bezos money.
Right, and finally an opportunity for Jeff Bezos to make a little bit of cha-ching, you know what I'm saying, get some of the greenbacks.
Well, right? No, he's going to lose enormous amounts of money on this, and so that's what we should be excited about. The Bezos is going to flush a lot of money.
Doesn't matter which direction it goes, Naomi. Right?
Oh yeah, the spice must flow. It's true.
The spice must flow. All right, next.
Yeah, right. All right, let's go to our next. Our next link, whatever that is. Where are we now?
Versus.
This is the one. I think this is funny. This is from last week, but it's just every week there's a new thing with this, right? Where Epic and Apple are fighting over whether Epic should have to pay the Apple tax, because Apple are basically acting like a bunch of monopolist rent seekers, just sitting like a tick, sucking on the blood of people trying to put their apps through the store, right? Mm-hmm. Which is like, okay, whatever, fair enough. You're the marketplace, but I don't know, the amount of labor that Apple actually puts into to running its app store is minuscule compared to the cut that they take. Do
you think that there are ticks that are parasites on other ticks?
Yeah, I think that there are. They're like little aphids. Yeah, aphids tend to do that, right?
Yeah,
and there are
the situation we're looking at here.
And there are blood-sucking birds that also clean rhinos, right? So you can be a tick and also provide business value or whatever. Yeah. And so Danny has a great tidbit. This is characteristic of this, right? The judge actually just muted the Apple lawyer on Zoom, because the Apple lawyers are huge jerks. It's amazing how much jerks they are, right? So this is a legal claim that Apple is making against Epic. They're saying Fortnite is over That's like their claim to the court. They're like,
Yeah,
Fortnite isn't even popular anymore. Like, it's not popular anymore. The only reason Epic is doing this is to create buzz about Fortnite. And this is just such a great, amazing claim, right? It's just an enormous amount of shade. Two, it's like saying like, yeah, you guys are such failures. You're only doing this stunt in order to try and shore up your crappy business. And then also it's like, assuming that Fortnite would somehow have a resurgence in popularity because of of this legal battle, which is like pulling Fortnite off of the the App Store, like that would be a gambit to like get teenagers really interested in Fortnite again. Yeah,
it's not directly relevant to the legal claims that are being made. It's more.
Well, it kind of is. It is
speculation. Isn't it a speculation on the motivation? Oh, this is motivated by X. Well, kind of. Isn't that irrelevant? It's kind of
no, it's not. This is something that a judge could potentially take into consideration to dismiss emotion or another procedural phase. Like if Epic is trying to say, look, this claim is groundless, that should be dismissed, or this shouldn't be allowed, right? There are often arguments like this where people are accusing each other of having bad motivations. That happens all the time in courtrooms. And then the judge has to decide like, okay, I think this is full of shit or it's not full of shit. And that's a surprising amount of legal maneuverings involves that.
Yeah, interesting. Well, this is a case where this just makes me miss Mike Dicta.
Mike Dicta.
Remember that old podcast? So
from last year or something?
Yeah, called Mike, M-I-C, Dicta, D-I-C-T-A, which was a bunch of lawyers talking about legal cases, and it was funny and it was awesome, and they would be able to explain this to me in a way that would make sense. But as it is, I just I don't know. My take on this whole thing is that it's an opportunity to develop the skill of not seeing everything through a lens of hero and victim, right? Or through the kind of like we just tend to see everything in terms of like who's the good guy here and who's the bad guy. What's the moral framing of this? What's the moral narrative? And I think this is just a case where there really aren't good guys and bad guys. There's these two big corporations. There's some very complicated, legal precedent. There's some very uncertain outcomes. It's not clear what would be best for me personally, for us as a community, for the people in general. It's not, there's very little certainty. And yet it doesn't stop people from having that urge to like quickly parse this into a kind of moral narrative about who's right and wrong in that sense. I don't
think there's a good guy in this, but I agree with you about that. But I think that there are two different kinds of big corporations here. And for me, it's absolutely clear if I could put my thumb on the scale in a completely unethical way, I would absolutely be like down with Apple. Yeah, Apple sucks here.
Yeah, that's my urge too. Apple has never liked games, right? Built into the DNA of Apple is Steve Jobs' snobbish dislike of games. He came up during a time when games represented a kind of tacky, vulgar thing that he wanted to define Apple in opposition to. And that's still present, even though Apple is now like a shepherd of a huge chunk of the game industry, maybe a majority of the game industry. They do it with pincers because they hold their nose and and then they try to make tasteful games, and it's like, and they don't get it. They've never gotten it. And Epic.
That's the aesthetic grounds. That's the aesthetic grounds to dislike Apple. But they're just terrible landlords, and that's the relationship they have, right? Everybody pays rent to them, and they're crappy, right? They're like a landlord who is enforcing like completely like bad neighborhood decoration regulations on everyone, right? Yeah. And they charge more rent than they really need to be. As
Dan Hawk pointed out, they killed Flash.
Yeah, they exactly. They killed Flash, and they censor people constantly.
I'm doing the thing that I personally, and I've had bad experiences with them personally, getting games onto the App Store. It's very unpleasant. You get treated disrespectfully in a kind of unpleasant way. However, I just, again, I think it's wrong to then just kind of like impose my kind of gut kind of, kind of moral sense on this story, because look, Epic ain't no great shakes either.
No, yeah, but they don't have to be.
Also,
Right.
Apple's
The great thing is that I think that there are principles here which we can be like, in principle, Apple stinks in this case.
Yeah,
and
it's harder for me to know exactly what those principles are, right? I personally think that the chunk.
Well, there's monopolism might be one of them, right?
You know, the chunk that Apple takes is way too big.
Sure.
But it's hard to know, like, oh, there is some perfect number and it's X, and I know that because why? It's a very tangled.
I don't think it is tricky because it's whatever, it's set by the market, right? But the market isn't operating here. The market is broken here. We know that that's the case because Apple is dominating and they can price fix. So like that's
all markets are broken, right? All markets are always broken. We're always in this in between phase.
And so we can point at this one here, like here's the one where it's really broken. Yeah. So if Epic is complaining that the market is broken, and then you look at it and you're like, yeah, this is clearly kind of a monopoly, then you can be like, yeah, Apple kind of stinks in this case, right?
I'm cautiously on Epic's side. So
it's the same here.
One thumb halfway up on this one.
Halfway up, right? Which the great thing is, it doesn't mean that you have to be an Epic fan. You definitely don't have to be. All right, let's go. Let's keep on going to the next one.
Tencent.
Oh, the Tencent gaming purge. Yeah, so let's keep talking about Epic a little bit.
So the Trump administration has decided they're going to get tough on Tencent.
Yeah. Are they now? I know. So they were going after a bunch of different holdings of Chinese companies. Tencent has like really come under close scrutiny. They're one of the largest gaming companies in the world.
Got to be the biggest, right?
I think they might be either the biggest or the second biggest. It's one of the biggest. But
come on, Alexander, come on, let's go.
And
wait. No, let's just wait. We'll wait for Alexander. No, I'm sorry.
So what they were really going after was they were going after TikTok first, right? Like for some reason that was the thing that aroused the administration's ire. They're like, we have to shut down TikTok. Nobody can download TikTok, right? Like all of this stuff, which was, I don't know, like the absurd, amazing thing about that is because that it appeared, even if this wasn't the case for whatever administrative bureaucratic reason, it appeared that they were trying to like stop the teenagers from TikToking, right? It was like, there's too many teens sharing their data on TikTok. We got to, and WeChat, right? Sorry, yeah, Danny's correct. So WeChat was the other big one, like stop people from downloading WeChat. So these social media services, but the at the same time, that really was announced as like, we have to stop this stuff, the government started looking into their gaming investments as well. So Tencent's the owner of Riot and also like a stakeholder in Epic Games. So now there's a question of like, are all these cloud services? This really affects the cloud topic too, right, Frank? Because the way that where those cloud servers are is now this huge question of international jurisdiction and privacy law and who gets to sort of have control over that. That's how Oracle and Walmart somehow inserted themselves in the middle of the WeChat TikTok controversy and are now responsible for maintaining the cloud servers for those social media platforms in the U.S. So who knows? Will the same thing happen with gaming services? I don't know. This is it's a little wild. I
mean, it's hard to. This is another case where it's hard to know who to root for or against.
for governments,
administration. And look, I know he's our president, and we have to treat him with respect. Got to give the guy a chance. You know what I'm saying? So I'm all in on giving him it. But I'm beginning to wonder if he really knows what he's doing. You know what I'm saying? And we've got like what, it's good for there to be some pressure on these big Chinese companies to like move in the direction of being more held accountable, caring more about privacy,
right?
Having some checks on kind of like on their ability to kind of expand and their power.
Sure, it's one of those things where you're like, if you're like, well, I'm glad somebody is saying something to giant Chinese companies that might be just handing over data to the Chinese government, and then you're like, oh, it's the Trump administration's doing it, and you're like, well, again, in principle, it's good for somebody to be like, hold up. to those. And you do not have to like Trump at all, right? To actually agree in principle that there needs to be a check on that.
Yeah.
And Danny is saying the pressure is be on the tech companies. Yes. Yeah. Right. So like all the tech companies, right? But who's going to,
Is Tencent not a tech company?
So they are a tech company, right? Like as opposed to the government, but the government is one of the only forces that the tech companies would really be accountable to, right? And in fact, the tech companies are accountable to the Chinese government. They're extremely accountable.
Also really weird. It's harder to distinguish, to know exactly what the relationship is between these big Chinese gaming companies and the party.
Ironically, the government in China is extremely good at holding tech companies accountable. Maybe too good, right? They're like, you're going to fall in line and do you're going to fall in line and do what we believe is in the interests of the people, and that's basically what the PRC has to say, and that's okay.
There are really no clear heroes in this story.
Right. And the question is like, okay, is it like Facebook and Twitter and all of these companies they're actually operating with much less government oversight than the Chinese companies. Mm-hmm. Should those companies be held accountable for the same kinds of privacy things that, that Trump is threatening to toss Tencent and WeChat and QQ and all of these other platforms out? Like what would happen if the same eye of Sauron were turned on to our tech companies? Because in this capitalist utopia that we have going on here in the U.S., right? The idea is like, oh, actually, we let our companies manage themselves, regulate themselves, and that hasn't always gone that well, strangely enough, and it hasn't worked out all the time.
Yep, that's true. So two thumbs sideways on this one, but
definitely, very much sideways. But checks and balances, an important principle. This one I love this article. Yeah.
So the next article is about this. This is such a cool studio.
Studio Oleo Mingus.
Yeah, they've got the best looking games. If you scroll down and look at some of they're an Indian game studio that produces these kinds of very surrealist, very beautifully visual kind of exploratory games. That are just, I think drop dead gorgeous. Look at that. Look at the big toothpaste tube in there. Oh, isn't it nice?
Yeah, and so this struck me in part because I hadn't heard of this studio, and now I want to play their games. I don't even know. I assume that these games are probably multilingual. Maybe I'm assuming that in part because the V&A museum
the ones that I played are almost there's not a lot of language in them.
There's not a lot of language in them. Great.
Yeah, you're just looking at stuff and clicking on things, and they're quite small and they're little experiments. They're really good, and I think you get them for free, maybe. Or maybe
quite possibly. And so the thing that I thought was really great about this article, the one that was linked in The Guardian, is that they're interviewing the creators about how they see themselves in the tradition of subversive, like anti-authoritarian works of parody and satire being made in India, in Gujarat, in Bengal, even stuff like cartoons made for kids and satirical comics, going all the way back to the Raj and British rule, and saying that they see themselves in that tradition, making video games in that tradition, and that they are using their voice to oppose Modi, right? Who's like extremely authoritarian government in India.
Right, the current prime minister.
Yeah, current prime minister, stoking tensions between Muslim and Hindu communities and kind of using that to sort of stay in power. It's great. This is really exciting to just see people coming out of a different game dev community tradition, just straight up saying games are great because they can be really political, right? And that's
if you. This reminds me a little bit of the Russian game we looked at last week with the giant policeman in it.
Right.
Similar kind of surrealist vibe.
Yeah, militioner.
Kind of oppositional political positioning. And it really kind of makes you, it makes you think about the relationship of art to politics, in that so much of it is about framing. Right. Just the fact that they're saying that this is what their games are and how they want their games to be positioned is really is the thing that makes them political. Like if you play these games, they're not explicitly political. They're not, but the fact that they're saying, no, we want you to like think about this experience in the context of these particular political traditions, and we want to present our work in opposition to the current political status quo. Which kind of makes sense, because if you think back to like the 60s, right, and like protest songs, like Blowing in the Wind or something, like it's not the lyrics of Blowing in the Wind, right, that make it a political work. It is who is singing it when, right? It's the fact that, that people sang it during protests, or it was associated with a particular political movement, and it becomes a flag or a banner that people can rally around, and it becomes meaningful in that context. It's like you're saying, here is how to think about my work and what it means. And I think that's a really interesting, because too often we think about, the politics of the work is like, somehow it just needs to be explicit in like what is, represented, inside the fictional world of the game, or like in like, in a kind of literal translation of the content of the game in some way. And it doesn't have to be that. Sometimes it can be like, no, my if you think about the political power of disco, right? Like what did that, it wasn't necessarily in the particular,
in the lyrics of the songs or something, right? Yeah.
It's like what community is playing this, how do they think about this, and how does it motivate them and become part of their
meaning comes from a lot of different places, right? It's not just all in the text that's placed in there by the author. And I wonder whether we're at a point where there are sort of like clashing critical traditions about this, right? Where some people are liable to look at a game and try and just read the message in it extremely literally and say, like, does this have good politics, or does this have bad politics? Can I tell if I just read the script of the game? And so to me, this reminds me of Dia Lucina's take on that new game, from the Life is Strange folks from Don't Nod, right? From Don't Nod's latest game, right? Where they're like really trying hard to check all the boxes to be like, if you look at the script of our game, you will see that we have like representation in there and stuff, right? But and this is almost the inverse, right? It's like, well, you can't just decipher the politics from just like, analyzing the text of the game directly. It's more about intention. It's about interpretation. It's a piece of artwork, like any kind of artwork that you might find exhibited or as part of any, community of creative practitioners. So I don't know, like, I feel like sometimes I feel like these things are at loggerheads with each other. And like Flan is saying in chat, like any aesthetic that or overt message that you're creating, like the rate of recuperation by the system is like so quick now. It's like instant recuperation, right? Or you can usually just assume it's already been recuperated.
Pre-recuperated. Recuperated.
Yeah, pre-recuperation is the new guideline. So it's already been used for an ad. There's already
This stuff is really hard, and it's never going to get easier. It is a dance, and it is an arms race, right? But art itself is an arms race, right? The arms race in art is creators are trying to make things that are interesting and surprising and expressive in ways that are new. And the audience is like always, like looking for cliches and formulas and trying to like demand, more interesting stuff. And so politics is the same way, right? I mean, it's a dance of meaning. It's a semiotic like cycle of back and forth, and it's just going to get more and more complicated. It's never going to be. But at the heart of it, there are still like principles and common sense kind of values and decency and kind of like shared experience. But it is at loggerheads with this drive towards more and more complicated layers of interpretation and meaning. Two thumbs way up for these guys.
Yeah, these guys get a lot of thumbs up.
Studio Oleomingus. Let's get them in to like do a guest lecture or something like that.
That would be awesome. Yeah. Let's talk about more games. We're like going, no more business news, just lots of games.
This is so good. Where did you find this, Naomi?
Somebody suggested it. Flash Game History.
I think this is great.
It might have been was it Alexander King? Somebody sent us this website And I'm grateful for it existing, even though I have to say, yeah, it focuses on Flash as opposed to our first platform, Shockwave, which nobody remembers.
Where's the Shockwave love?
Where's Shockwave? That's what I say whenever there's a Flash game thing. I'm like, what about Shockwave? And everyone's like, what's Shockwave?
What about Hypercard? Can we get some Hypercard?
Yeah, what happened to Hypercard? I used to play Hypercard games, yeah. So, but, anyway, this is
great. If you scroll down, you can
scroll down. It's awesome.
History of Flash and a kind of eulogy to Flash
with a lot of Adam Saltzman in the background.
The great Adam Saltzman, the king. Like shout out to Adam Saltzman, and then it just keeps going. It's just like it talks about, and then a bunch of different games. And if you scroll down,
keep scrolling. Yeah,
is this information diagram where it looks at the whole history of, I think, Newgrounds, maybe. Yeah,
it's every game on Newgrounds kind of visualized and talking about like how many games we're talking about is so enormous.
So the size of each one of those is a game. The size of the circle is how many plays it got, and if you roll over it, it'll tell you. So one of those is like, "Don't shit your pants." And one of those is, like Bad Dudes versus Bin Laden. And then you get these enormous like things where it's 60 million plays, and it's some game you've never heard of. And then they'll be like Meat Boy, and it's like, 4 million. And it's just a wonderful way to visualize the history of this really important and neglected chapter of video game history.
Yeah, and that Apple has killed. Let's just remind ourselves who's responsible for really driving the stake into the ailing patient neglected by Adobe. It's all Adobe's fault
it's like
too.
One of those Agatha Christie stories. We all killed Flash.
Yeah, but there were some of us more than others. And yeah, I don't know. I would have happily had a tool like Flash around forever. So good for putting game experiments out. I'm so sad that this era is over. This was I guess we could say, it was the formative era for so many of us who are teaching or studying or part of the game center, that we are kind of like part of this wave.
Right.
Yeah, very New York.
Game design thing is that you've got, 30 Flash games in your portfolio. And so we have a real relationship to this history. And it's sad, but if you scroll down, you can see it peters out before Flash itself became moribund. If you keep scrolling down, there you go. Don't shit your pants. If you keep scrolling down, keep going.
Yeah, it starts to really narrow, right? Like in 2012, it starts to really peter.
Look, like that's interesting, right?
Well, it's mobile games. It's mobile games that
maybe it's not so simple a story as it was, going great. It's just like, things have a life cycle, and Flash was maybe starting to die.
It's one website, right? This is the story of Newgrounds,
right?
And there were a bunch of other things going on out there, and so Flash was no longer at this point that it was no longer the biggest game in town, right? It wasn't where like all the advertising revenues are coming from. And now it became a much smaller thing, and then people had to abandon it because they kept announcing that it was canceled, or you couldn't play it on iOS and all sorts of stuff like that. Yep. So here's the two pieces of good news. One is that bluemaxima.org is archiving all of this stuff, right? You can. So it's going to be a lot harder for anybody to play, but at least it's not lost to history forever. You can get Flashpoint, the preservation project that also includes Shockwave games and games on other and wild tangent games and stuff like that. Yeah, that's what Matthew Robo is mentioning. So Project Flashpoint is at bluemaxima.org/Flashpoint. I might as well try and put it into chat.
Danny can post it.
Yeah, and so. Yeah, the games will always be there for at least for archival and study purposes, hopefully, and you can download them and get them all, right? Yeah. And then this will happen again. That's my prediction.
Yeah.
Like tiny games, just make them and put them out there into the world, even easier than Unity.
Yeah.
Like just a platform that is anarchic and open, like the internet is open.
Yeah.
Unity is part of the way there right now, right? Like somehow I don't feel like it has exactly the right component ingredients, but yeah.
It's okay for things to die.
Yeah.
Everything dies.
Yeah, they'll die, and then because in the fullness of time, like things recur, like in a new form.
It's more important to make a thing and have and touch a lot of people and have it, have an impact, and then go away, than to try to like cling to this thing and keep it in a bell jar on a shelf that you can always go back to.
Right.
Fine. The games are like parties. They happen. They're amazing, and then at a certain point they're over. So.
Right. So once Apple is broken up by the government, then maybe it's like there'll be room for something new. The next thing to happen.
Let's skip the. Do we need to talk about Hades? It's super popular.
We don't need to. Yeah, Hades is super popular. We were going to talk about Hades.
It's popular. Everyone knows about Hades. It's popular.
Everyone knows about Hades. Supergiant is great. Right? They have great voice acting.
Let's talk about
Paradise Killer. Yeah, so we're going to skip over Hades and talk about Paradise Killer. Sorry, Hades fans.
It's fine. It's popular.
Honestly, I like the character design in Paradise Killer better.
I like both. I'll tell you this much: Hades and Paradise Killer, actually, if you squint, they share a certain visual aesthetic.
They for sure do. Yeah.
Yeah, they're both kind of vaporwave a little bit, and
they're a little vaporwave, and they're like, they have this like ornate flowing clothes, like rippling all around you style, which I associate with like depictions of Chinese, goddesses and stuff like that. Right?
And Paradise Killer is really weird and cool. It's kind of great looking. Look at that. This is where you start. Go up for a second. This is where you start the game in this fancy, like this fancy resort, which is very much my style. So right away, I'm like, I feel very comfortable here, right?
With huge skulls,
big skulls. And it's very sexy, very thirsty game.
Just like Hades is also getting attention for that.
Yeah, they're both very sexy.
Yeah, this is such mild sexy compared to like if you play any Otome game, right?
No idea what you're talking about. But it's also like I wish this game didn't have quite so much reading in it. I mean, there's a lot of reading. I about a half an hour in, I'm just skipping over all the things, and I think I'm not supposed to because.
There's probably clues in there, right?
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be like looking for clues, but there weren't enough clues in the first like 12,000 words, and so I just started skipping over things. But it's kind of great looking, it has a great vibe, and
this is the video game equivalent of like a board game like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, right? Where it's just you get a whole bunch of information shot at you, and some of it is behind puzzles. More puzzles in this digital thing than in Sherlock Holmes, I think. But and then you just have to figure it out. Like it's going to ask you some questions at the end, like who do you think did it? And here's the amazing thing. So there are other games that have done this before, like notably Deadline from Infocom. Is that a Brian Moriarty game, by the way? Who designs Deadline? No, it's Mark Blank. Mark Blank designed Deadline. And that was the first mystery game where it was really just like you go investigate. And then you have to accuse somebody, and if you're wrong in that game, you get a game over, right? You have no way of really. It doesn't lead you by the hand. This game, it doesn't even tell you whether you accuse the right person. It's just like, oh, okay, we're gonna, you accuse this person, that's it, and then you don't get to find out whether you were right or wrong, right? So there's something about the like pulling back on the gameness and just pushing forward this like simulation.
I have to push back on that rumor going
around.
Oh,
sorry.
As someone who's finished Paradise Killer or that marketing point, I can't agree with that at all. The game definitely tells you if you've gone.
Oh, wait. Okay. Tell us what the real deal is.
In no uncertain terms. So you're collecting evidence, and then and then you accuse people, and then there's like a trial. And if you get it right, the game is indirectly telling you kind of, it's not saying correct, but through the dialogue, in the same way that like Final Fantasy NPCs would be giving you ironic hints about the game. It's the same way.
Yeah. And is it the same if you get it wrong?
Robert, you might be technically correct about this, but I got to say right now you're kind of acting like that editor they brought into the Washington Square News. You're really kind of bossing us around, telling us how to do our job.
I'm not spokesman. What am I doing?
Okay, we're gonna let it slide. Thank you.
I'm just saying.
Check this game out.
Okay, I'm out.
It's close to work. Anyway, this is the pick to click. We like it. Let's try to get in a couple more articles before we have to go. Another great little game that we've been looking at is Umurangi Generation.
Yeah, Umurangi Generation. I think
Australian, like a kind of a Australian indie dev, and a gorgeous kind of janky cyberpunk photo game.
Right.
Maori. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm excited to play this. Hey, maybe there'll be an announcement before too long about some streaming happening, possibly tomorrow night, where we will be streaming this game as part of our upcoming series on racial justice at the NYU Game Center. If you're a current student or part of the faculty, or alumni, and if you're in the Slack, come on by. This may be one of the games we're gonna stream it.
Yeah.
And pointing out in chat, DDA saying, there's been a lot of great coverage at Waypoint of this game. It's this very small group. It's just two people, a composer and then the designer and developer. And it's a photography game. It's like all storytelling told through photography and like wandering around this environment. Like rooted in the history of I think the North Island of New Zealand, and talking about the colonialism there, but also of like a different kind of spin on cyberpunk, right? Not just cyberpunk nostalgia as like, let's go back to the 80s, but thinking about like, okay, how can that sort of aesthetic or way of looking at the world and dystopia like be a mirror directly on what's happening in the present?
Also, if you look at the fancy, expensive cyberpunk game that's coming out, it's so slick and it's so
soulless
produced, and it's such a big piece of product. And then you compare it to this feels like cyberpunk should. Like, this is like, it's personal, it's got some jagged edges to it. Right. It's fresh and different and new looking. Reminds me a little bit of Tales from Off-Peak City. So that which also has a real fun photo game in it. So it's a great vibe and just a fantastic aesthetic.
Right.
So let's talk real quick about so video game museums are suffering. I don't want to talk about this. Why are there video game museums? Why do people think, I know the best way to present video games? It's in a museum. Right?
Well, I think it's more about the archiving. It's one way to have an archive, right?
I guess. But I think
that funds itself.
The way to archive video games is the things that we've been talking about. It's like the Internet Archive and the Flashpoint stuff, and those. It's not in a room. It's not in a big building where you're selling tickets to people. Yeah,
it's interesting because my sense from video game museum curators is that they're also interested in the material history, right? Like the actual cartridges and consoles and those things, and that's part of it. Video games are not just like digital imaginary artifacts as much as like we might like to think about them. But
I don't know. My feeling is just like museums want to get butts through the door, and they're like, well, what's a form of culture that people actually like right now? And it's video games. I don't know. I've been on I've been in many of these kinds of conversations where you go in and you have this like weird, awkward conversation with museum people about video games, and it just never turns out great. Is what I'm going to say. It's a weird context for games.
Right. So who knows? This may be the death knell.
Does music belong in a museum? I don't know. Right? It just doesn't feel quite right to me.
Well, museums with music, they think about it in a really different way, I think, right? It's more about the ephemera, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Like, here's the Stradivarius or something. Like, so maybe, we could do that. Okay, next article. Let's talk.
The last one?
Okay. Among Us. So this is a game that's popular, but unlike Hades, I feel like there is some news here, right? Because Among Us is blowing up right now. It's a social deduction game. People are playing a ton of it on Twitch. And the interesting thing about this is the history of its popularity over time. So, because this is a game that came out a couple of years ago, I think. I'm not exactly sure when. And
not super recently, but
it first came out, it was a local multiplayer mobile game. So it's kind of based on Werewolf. It's a social deduction game. They made a mobile, local multiplayer social deduction game, which it's the kind of thing that our students might make, right?
Yeah, that's what really strikes me. Is it really? I could see this being a Game Center thesis project so easily.
Yeah, and we would say, look, if you're making a mobile only local multiplayer social deduction, that's good, but no one's ever going to play it. And they put it out, no one played it, but they didn't just abandon it. They just kept working on it. And so they made an online multiplayer version of it, and then still no one played it. And then they just kept working on it, and they kept working on it. They never abandoned it, and they just, because they believed in it and they knew it was really fun.
And then they had a little community who was playing it. That was important too, right?
Eventually it became popular in Brazil and in, I think, like Mexico and a couple of other small places like that.
Yeah, internationally. And it's all about getting those little toeholds. They got toeholds in some places that allowed them to continue building up, and then it exploded. I think that, the pandemic probably helped, but then it's a different kind of game, right? It's a social deduction game. And here's the cool part is somehow they landed on a formula that is perfect for performance, right? And that was the key thing. I think it's so important. I'm sure that this will probably influence Robert's game about streamers in upcoming semesters, right? But this game just somehow got perfectly designed as a matter of evolution to allow streamers to perform like a play, an emergent play with each other, and have drama.
Play with each other.
Right.
A lot of these streamers are friends. They want to have games that you can play with your friends the way games used to work. They used to be.
And you're not just shooting. And you're not just shooting each other from opposite sides of a huge battlefield.
You're actually playing a game of choices and actions, and it's social, and there's language, and there's interaction, and so this is it's a wonderful story of a little team that made a good game and kind of stuck with it and believed in it, and then eventually, slowly. Built up an audience in little pockets globally, and then now finally the big Western mainstream is catching up, and it's blowing up on a big scale. It's just a fun, interesting, useful story.
Yeah, I love how simple the graphics are. I love that this is a social deduction game. I love that it's so close to the roots of social dynamics in games. So I consider this a great success story so far.
Yep, 2 thumbs way up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think we're out of. We're like, are we over time? Do we have to?
Maybe that's it.
Okay, super. Well, thank you again so much, Robert, and thank you, Mirabai, for captioning everything. Thank you, chat.
Thank you, Naomi. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Mirabai. Thank you, chat.
All right. See you guys next week.
All right, that was the Discourse, hosted by Naomi, Clark, and Frank Lance. I was your operator, Robert Yang, behind the scenes, the voice of God. We also have graphics by Winnie Song and captioning by Mirabai Knight of Steno Night Cart Services. And again, we'd like to remind everyone that this Thursday is our first talk of the lecture series of the fall 2020 semester, and we are featuring Elizabeth Hargrave, a board game designer who designed Wingspan, which won the Spiel des Jahres Award 2019. Very, very good game, and please come watch our talk this Thursday, 7 p.m. All right, see everyone later. Thanks for watching. Bye.